What's going on, guys? T2RX6 here, back for another Transformers review, and today we're going to be taking a look at the GDO Cliffjumper. And I was just passing through Toys R Us looking for a wheelie for my friend, and I saw this guy on the shelf, and I said, why not? So I was itching for something new, and I picked him up. Now you can see I've applied the repro labels on the side here. I actually had them on my first edition, and I figured since the on-screen Cliffjumper didn't have these, it'd be better on the GDO one. And then unfortunately the hood one didn't come off so well, so I painted that one black myself, and I still got a little bit of work to do to smooth it out and give it a second coat, but it's good enough for a review. I also went ahead and gave some red paint to the tail lights and the exhaust pipes here, so just so you know, he doesn't come right out of the box exactly like this. But yeah, so he is the first edition Cliffjumper mold, and there's really not much to say other than it is a pretty awesome muscle car look. Here is the first edition. You can see that the color is a little bit different. He's in the light, it's a little harder to see on the video, but he is actually a lot darker in color than this one is. So there is some differences, and the headlights actually, again, not showing too well. These are actually lighter. So the reason that I was interested in picking this guy up is because the fact that it is a classic style Cliffjumper head was interesting to me, and I kind of like the idea of Cliffjumper on my shelf being a different mold than Bumblebee instead of sharing the molds. Now, here's the classics Cliffjumper, and you can see the size difference, I guess, in the cars. But really, he's being a first edition mold, he's not too far off from the standard deluxe size, like Jazz and such. For example, here he is next to Treadshot, and you can see, in terms of their car modes, you know, it's not too much. I could see him being a little bit bigger because of him being a muscle car and all, but it's not too bad in terms of size. So yeah, so I picked that up just because I really thought he might look like a good Cliffjumper to go on the shelf instead of this guy to differentiate him from Bumblebee. So let's actually get to the transformation on this guy, because there's really nothing more to say about the car mode, except that I kind of wish that they had crafted an extra piece and took this little horns off. I think it would have looked cool to have him differentiated by not having the horns at all. And I'm considering putting on like a small little spoiler back here just to make the back end look a little different, but I haven't settled on that yet. Anyway, transformation time. So we start by opening up these side panels here, and it's all just tabbed together at the bottom. What you're gonna do is just keep kind of splitting it apart, and then you can swing these legs on down, and you'll rotate this panel forward like that, so towards the roof of the car all the way around, and then fix his legs right here so that they're straight. Let's angle this up a little more, and then you're going to take his foot past the edge of the car and just fold this in. Make sure you fold that little piece of the window in and just kind of clip it together. So again, adjust his knee so it's positioned correct. Rotate the little foot on out. Bring in the glass and peg it together, and that's going to give you pretty much the front of them. We can take this little red piece and just kind of push it all the way forward as you can right now, because we're going to have to do some adjusting to that later. Let's go to the back of the car here and just kind of separate the panel like this and bring this rear end of the car up onto the rear windshield like that, and fold out his arms. Now this GDO one, these ball joints are really stiff in this socket compared to my first edition. And the other thing is these guns, The gun arms are really wobbly compared to my other first edition, but it's not that big of a deal. So anyway, once we have that all kind of split like that, we can rotate it around like this, and then it's just a matter of separating his shoulders from the roof here, which is difficult due to these tight ball joints, and then split everything, and then flip up his head, and then we can just kind of rotate everything down and into position and fix it so it all looks nice here. And what we're gonna do is fix his arms. I like to put his hands like this just because that's where his elbow is, but that's up to you entirely. Fold the back of the car on in, or I'm sorry, the sides of the car on in over his hands, and just kind of fix that up. Now what you're gonna do is adjust his chest here so that you can take this waist piece and kind of shove it in between, and then that forms the split there. And so we got him pretty much done. We just have to clean up the back a little bit. Now what this does is just on a hinge, it's going to go up like that. But first, what we have to do is take these little bottom pieces of his bumper here and split it so he can swing this forward. And this is kind of an optional thing if you really want to do this or not. I'm mixed between it, and I'll show you why after. Well, let me show you now. You can kind of make it so it goes up like this, and it's a little more bulky on his back, but it does give him a different looking front than the regular. But I think ultimately I do like the actual transformation, which is to take these and bring them on forward, just because it makes them feel more complete. And you can also take this piece here so it sits better and just rotate it on up so it sits like that on his butt. And so once we have these rotated around, what you actually want to do is kind of mess with the windshield until you can get them to slide up on the windshield, and that gives him the complete chest. And now it's just a matter of getting everything situated so he looks good. And there we go. There's Cliffjumper in his robot mode here. Except for this chest panel not working. There we go. Robot mode Cliffjumper. And if you don't have the first edition, I think that this guy is totally worth picking up because it lets you experience the first edition. But more than that is I think he does a really good job at being a different classics Cliffjumper. So for articulation, like I said, he's got the shoulder joint that's real stiff, but it lets it go, 360. He has a good range of motion there. The swivel, he's got a double jointed elbow, so that's pretty nice. The wrists do rotate. He doesn't really have a waist just because of the transformation there, but no big deal. Ball jointed leg, nice knee, and a little bit of ankle tilt thanks to how it is ball jointed there. So overall, the posability is pretty decent with this guy. Oh yeah, and of course the head ball joint. If you notice, my Cliffjumper didn't do so well in the paint department. It has a little bit of paint on his face. I'll be taking that off, but not something you can see in the package because he's packaged in robot mode, or vehicle mode, I'm sorry. So, yeah, he's a very nice Cliffjumper. He still does have his guns, like I showed you. They are wobbly on mine, but you can still open up this and flip his hand on in, and you may need to adjust the positioning of the hand, and that way he has the hand cannon if you really want it that way, which I think is awesome. I wish more Transformer toys had the built-in weapon. I just think that works really nice. So for a comparison, here he is next to his Transformers Prime counterpart, and the head really does do a decent amount on making them feel different, in my opinion. Also, the head turned out a lot better than the pictures seem to show. I think it's pretty much been confirmed that those pictures just had the head photoshopped on, and this one works just much better. And for one more, since I have 3 of this mold here, here's the Rust in Peace Cliffjumper. So it just looks like 3 different incarnations of Cliffjumper. Here he is next to his Classics counterpart here. And the Classics one is a bit shorter than Cliffjumper, but it'll still work on the shelf because I care less about scale than most people. As long as he's smaller than, you know, Ironhide and Jazz and stuff, I'm okay with him being not this tall and not that tall. Speaking of Jazz, here is the Treadshot mold, so you can see Treadshot / Jazz, when you put him on the shelf, is still going to be taller than him. So he does retain that, you know, smaller bot feel. And I like that. Now, going back to the Classics here, this is the Beelzebos head. I did a review on that before. The Hasbro head. I don't know. I'm torn on which one I like better. This one's more Generation 1 style Cliffjumper. This is kind of a more modern version. But it's not bad. But what I've been wondering this whole time, and I haven't actually tried it myself, is if the glass gas cannon will fit in his hand. And it sort of does. Doesn't really hold very well. So I was curious if that would work, because he'd look kind of cool carrying such a big cannon also. But yeah, I think that this is totally a worthwhile Cliffjumper if you see him, because he is going to be a shelf warmer, because he's not as desirable as any of the other GDOs on the shelf. But if you don't have a Cliffjumper, or you're one of the people who kind of wishes that Cliffjumper had his own mold instead of sharing a mold with Bumblebee, then I think that this is a very, very good option with that in mind. He fits in pretty well, and frankly, I know some people say that, you know, the animated versus, or the aesthetic of Prime versus Classics doesn't seem to fit, but Prime fits a lot better than, say, like animated did, where you just have really cartoony looking fingers. Prime has some very more detailed bot mode pieces, and I think because of that, he fits right in on a Classic shelf. There's really, you know, aside from a few places that are maybe a little more rounded, he is a very blocky looking robot. So I think being that Classics have these really, you know, square lines all over the place, he's pretty close to fitting in with that, in my opinion. So anyway, this is T2RX6. I hope you guys enjoyed the review, and I'll see you next week.